Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my May TBR. There's a lot to talk about, so let's just dive right in. I read 17 books in May and most of them were by Asian or Asian American authors because it was the Asian Readathon to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. The first book that I read in May was Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Menansala. This book follows Leela as she breaks up with, I believe it's her fiance, moves back to her hometown to help her aunt at her restaurant, and not long after she moves back, her ex-boyfriend from high school dies in the restaurant not long after eating some of their food. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was fun and fast-paced, and I loved the mystery, and I also loved how the characters were written, and the twist at the end I totally did not see coming, and what else do you want from a mystery? The only issue I personally had with this book was a little bit in the middle. I got a little confused with the timeline because it was supposed to be on a Sunday, and businesses that they mentioned being closed on Sundays were open, and I wasn't quite sure what was happening. But other than that, this book was spot on for me. Next up, I read volumes 3 and 4 of Fullmetal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. These are so good. I think it's the fourth one that almost made me cry. I was tearing up. Something so emotional happens, and I just wanted to cry. This series follows these two brothers who, after trying to revive their mom, end up losing, one of the brothers loses an arm and a leg, and the other brother gets his soul bound to a suit of armor, and they're trying to go and figure out how to get their bodies back. This series is so good. I feel like most people have either watched the anime or have read the manga, so most people know how good the series is, so I don't need to tell you, but this series is so good. The next book that I read in May was Furthermore by Tahereh Mafi. This is a middle grade book about a young girl named Alice who goes on an adventure to Furthermore to find her father, and deals with some danger and adventure with her companion Oliver. Overall, I thought this book was pretty fun. It is a middle grade, so I'm not the target audience, and I did in some ways find it very simplistic, but that is kind of to be expected with a middle grade. And honestly, I don't have too much to say about it because I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, but I also didn't dislike it. After that, I read The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wong. This is so good. This is a graphic novel about a prince who likes to wear dresses and a dressmaker who makes those dresses for him. And it is practically perfect. The story is cute. The illustrations are amazing. It made me tear up as I was reading it because I got so into the story, which I love, especially in something so short, but it just packed a lot of emotion into the short little graphic novel. And if you have not read it, you definitely should because it is just ridiculously cute. Next up, we have Cells at Work Volume 1 by Akane Shimizu. This is a new manga that I just discovered after watching the anime on Netflix, and it follows the cells in the human body, and it is so good. The first volume, I loved the anime as well. I've already finished all of it. But the first volume of the manga, I adored it. It was so good. And honestly, like, this story of this is so well done. Because you, as you are following these cells, you get so emotionally invested in the cells. I just loved this. I also think it's really interesting because there's a lot of like educational stuff in here where this is a really good example where it shows like a cedar pollen allergen and then it explains what that is. So it's educational, but mostly it is so fun. I'm like in love with these characters that are based on cells in the human body. So if you can do that, you know you are a good writer. Also, the illustrations are amazing. So this is like perfect. There's like nothing wrong with this series. Next up, I read The Silence of Bones by June Her. This is a book that takes place in Joseon in like the 1800s, which is modern day Korea, and we follow a servant of the military who, part of her responsibility is touching the dead bodies of the women who die, because the men in this society cannot touch a woman unless they are like immediate relatives, like unless it's like nuclear family. There are also parts of houses and the city where the men cannot go because it's deemed to be like a woman's space. I thought this was a really interesting concept, and that's pretty much all I knew before I went into this book. I also featured this book in my reading vlog that I have posted, so if you want to hear more about it, go check out that video. I go a little bit more in depth. Overall, this was a good book. It was fairly middle of the road for me though, because I think I just didn't connect with the writing style as much as I would have liked to. Also, I had some pretty high hopes for this book going into it because I've heard so much about it, and it wasn't quite what I expected. So I was not necessarily disappointed, but I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, just based on the hype I'd heard about it. Overall, it was still good. I just didn't get as connected with the characters as I would have liked. I think the characters started out really strong in the beginning, but for me, as it got towards the end, I didn't care about the characters as much. There was a pretty interesting twist in it. However, that twist is not one that I don't know if it's supposed to be like a surprise, because it is something that I saw coming very early on, and I don't know if that was the intention of the author or if the intention was this is supposed to be a surprise but there are hints to it. And if that's the case, I think the hints might just be a little bit too obvious. Next up, I read Letters to a Young Muslim by Omar Saif Gobash. This is literally just a book of letters from Omar to his son about what it is like to be a Muslim, and it kind of talks about different aspects of Islam and how Omar thinks his son should think about these aspects and what he should do about them, kind of. I don't have too much to say about this book because it is nonfiction. I read it mostly just for my own education. It was really interesting. I feel like I learned a lot. As you can see, I tabbed it up at some of the parts that I thought were particularly educational or interesting. Next, I read Witchwood by Tahera Mafi. This is the sequel to Furthermore, and we just follow the events of Furthermore and kind of continue on with that story. This was not as good as Furthermore. I thought about DNFing it because I felt so disconnected from the characters. I am not the target audience, and I think that maybe plays into it a little bit of why I couldn't get into the writing and I couldn't feel for the characters the way I would have wanted to. I am pretty happy that I did finish it because I did think the ending was pretty interesting. It is a middle grade, and it didn't quite capture me the way that I like my middle grades to, and it didn't quite take me on the ride that I would have liked. Next, I read Winter in Paradise by Ellen Hildebrand. This is a book I have been meaning to read for literal years, and I finally got around to it. This is also a book that I would describe kind of like candy. It didn't feel like it had a lot of substance. That doesn't mean it's not good. It just doesn't mean that I found the story or the writing to be particularly fulfilling. This book follows a woman and her two sons as they find out that the husband had been having an affair and he owns a home on St. John's that none of them knew about. and it's a mystery. They're trying to figure out what happened to the husband, also trying to figure out who the mystery woman is. And overall, it is pretty interesting, but these characters all kind of suck. They are very real. That is one thing that I think Ellen Hilderbrand did really, really well, was all of the characters felt like very real people, and I didn't really like any of them. There's especially one character. I am a very character-driven reader, and one bad character can make me want to put down a book. And that almost happened in this book, where there was one character, one of the sons, that I absolutely despise. And I almost put down the book because I hate him so much. But I ended up finishing it, and like I said, it's like candy. I don't really feel like there was anything super substantial about it, but I did still enjoy it. Next, I read Upon a Burning Throne by Ashok K. Banker. This is also featured in my reading vlog that I mentioned earlier, if you want to hear more about this. I love, love, love this book. It is so good. In this, we follow so many people, just like everyone and their dog. Literally, we follow some animals in here. The setup for this book is a ceremony to decide who is fit to reign for the empire. And the way they do this is by placing these literal babies upon a throne that bursts into flames. If the children survive, they are fit to rule. If they do not, they were not fit to rule, and they're dead. This book starts out and you're just hooked immediately. I mean, the first line, it has one of the best first lines I've ever read, because the first line is literally just, "They came to watch the children burn." I was hooked from the beginning, and this book never ever disappointed. It is a ride, and it is so good. I love all of the perspectives that we get to see. It is so fun to jump from perspective to perspective, especially because some of the perspectives, you're in them for like 2 pages and then you jump to a new one. So you really get to see what is happening from all angles, and it just really, really enriches the story. And I think Ashok K. Banker is one of the few authors that can pull that off successfully. Because I do not feel like if another author tried to have this many perspectives, I don't know if it would work. So this is a testament to this writing. I honestly loved this book, and there's nothing bad about it that comes to my mind. There's nothing that I was like, oh, I don't like that. Honestly, this book is practically perfect, and I'm really excited to read the second one. Next, I read Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. This is book 2 in the Murderbot Diaries, and it is really good. Murderbot, if you are unaware, is this series about a murder bot who doesn't really want to be a murder bot and only wants to watch TV shows. That's pretty much all I knew when I went into this, and I honestly think that's all you really need to know. They are novellas, most of them, so any more than that is kind of getting into spoiler territory. But these 2 novellas that I read so far, and especially Artificial Condition, I loved it. It was so good. And I'm really excited to read the next one. I think Murderbot is a really, really good character. And I have read other books about robots, and the robots have never been as engaging as Murderbot is. Next, I read How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe by Charles Yu. I don't know what this book is about. I read it. I don't really know what it's about. I enjoyed this. It is weird, and I finished it. It's a very short audiobook. I finished the audiobook, I turned it off, and I was like, I don't know what just happened. I enjoyed it, but there's part of me that's still like, what was that book about? There's definitely some like time travel-y stuff happening. What hooked me to read this book was the synopsis, and since I cannot find a good way to describe this in my own words, I'm just gonna take the synopsis that I read and read it. It says, a story of a son searching for his father through quantum space-time. Minor Universe 31 is a vast story space on the outskirts of fiction, where paradox fluctuates like the stock market, lonely sex bots beckon failed protagonists, and time travel is serious business. Every day, people get into time machines and try to do the one thing they should never do, change the past. That's where Charles Yu, time travel technician, part counselor, part gadget repairman, steps in. He helps save people from themselves, literally. When he's not taking client calls or consoling his boss, Phil, who could really use an upgrade, Yu visits his mother, stuck in a 1-hour cycle of time. She makes dinner over and over and over, and searches for his father, who invented time travel and then vanished. Accompanied by Tammy, an operating system with low self-esteem, and Ed, a non-existent but ontologically valid dog, Yu sets out and back and beyond in order to find the one day where he and his father can meet in memory. He learns that the key may be found in a book he got from his future self. It is called How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe, and he's the author. And somewhere inside it is the information that could help him. In fact, it may even save his life. As I said, this book is really weird and hard to describe. When I finished, I still felt kind of confused. But in the case of this book, that didn't really bother me all that much. Next up, we have We Could Be Heroes by Mike Chun. This book was, I think, the only real disappointment for me that I read in May. I was really excited about this book because it follows one of my favorite tropes where people wake up and they don't remember who they are, and they have no idea what's happening. They don't have any of their memories. And one of our main characters, Jamie, woke up in his empty apartment without any memories and then started robbing banks because he has the ability to wipe people's memories and erase them from their mind. And so I thought that was a really interesting setup. However, this book was good, but it wasn't as good as I expected it to be. And that's why I'm disappointed, because it didn't go kind of where I was expecting it to go, which is fine. And that's totally on me for having those expectations. But because I was expecting kind of something else out of it, I don't even know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. And while I did still enjoy the book, I was kind of let down because it just didn't live up to what I wanted it to be. Next, I read Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This, the same author as How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe. This, though, I think I enjoyed a little bit more. It is written in a very interesting style, because in this we follow this actor whose dream is becoming Kung Fu guy, and this story is told like half in kind of memoir style and then half in script, you're on a serial TV show style. It is very interesting. It is very emotional. It talks about a lot of things that really just like hit you in the feels, you know? This book, again, I listened to as an audiobook. It was really short. I thought the narrator did a really good job, and overall it was a good book. Next, I read The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. This is another one I have been sitting on for a long time. It's been on my list for a really long time to read it, and I finally did. This is kind of slice of life, kind of. It is really adventurous, but it is really short. It's a really short novella, and you're pretty much just following this one character in her time with this group of mercenaries. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was really good and the story was really interesting. There's not a whole lot I can say about this book because I don't want to give spoilers because it is so short, but it is really enjoyable. The last book I read in May was Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This I picked up because Stories of Your Life is the short story that the movie Arrival is based on. I watched Arrival for the first time last year, so I've been meaning to read this for a while because I watched Arrival for the first time during the pandemic, and it was a really good movie. So when I found out that it was based on a short story, I had to read the short story. So I got this collection, and like most short story collections, some of the stories I loved, some of the stories I thought were less good. There weren't really any stories in here that I actively disliked, but there were some stories that I was kind of like, it's just okay. But there are some stories in here that I just love. Stories of Your Life is just such a good story. It is incredibly well written. The subject matter of the story and like the idea for the story is really good. And there are a couple others in here, like the first one, which is called Tower of Babylon. Another really, really good story. And then also Hell is the Absence of God. So those three are my favorite. They were really, really, really good. And they are definitely short stories that I'm going to be thinking about a lot and hopefully rereading multiple times because they are just that good. I realized I forgot to mention what books were for what challenges for the Asian Readathon. So there are 5 challenges for the Asian Readathon. The first one is read any book by an Asian author. I have a lot of books I would count, but I'm just going to pick Ashok K. Banker, Upon a Burning Throne. Read any book featuring an Asian protagonist. Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Manansala. Read any book written by an Asian author in your favorite genre. Story of Your Life and Others, because this is all sci-fi short stories, and sci-fi is my favorite genre. 4 is read any nonfiction book written by an Asian author. For this, it's Letters to a Young Muslim. 5 is read any book written by an Asian author that's not US-centric. For this, I am going with The Silence of Bones by June He. That is everything I read in May. Thank you so much for watching. Leave me a comment down below letting me know what you read in May, and I will see you next time. Bye!